We're talking about reasons to be excited about Georgia football in 2025 next on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast.
You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Locked On Bulldogs podcast. I am Daniel, and that is our good friend, John, joining us today. John, welcome to the show. Glad to have you back on, but it's been too long.
I know. Thanks for having me back. I thought, maybe I was never going to be invited back, but miracles do happen.
Man.
Clint needs a break every now and then. And so
right.
I'm happy to, I think my face fits the window a little bit like Clint. So maybe that's why I'm here, but I'm excited to be back for whatever reason.
Yeah. I have to find someone whose silhouette is close enough to Clint's to blend. So that's what I'm going for. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. More on them in a little bit, but you can check them out at monarchmoney.com. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being an everydayer, a first listener. Thanks for being a part of the loyal 199, listening all the way to the end. If you're a long timer with the Locked On Bulldogs podcast, then you know our friend John from over at John Tweets Sports and Dog Dispatch. You're still rolling on the Dog Dispatch.
We're
right?
Still rolling, yeah.
Y'all need to go check out my man John and Coach Hayes and all of the content that's coming out over there on the Dog Dispatch. If you're listening to this, you're probably already on board, but maybe you need something new to check out. And so go check them out over there. Excited to have John on board. We're giving Clint a little bit of a break this week. He's been carrying the podcast for a while, so giving his back a little bit of rest. And I'm just going to ask John all of the reasons that he is excited about Georgia football this year. And so if you are a frequent listener to the Dog Dispatch, you probably heard all this before. But John, I haven't heard it before because I don't listen to the Dog Dispatch. I'm not going to
let's just go. I didn't even know what we were going to talk about today because I don't listen to Locked On Bulldogs. So,
that's right. That is right. John and I, if you don't know, we're in a big fight. We've gone our separate ways. We're not friends anymore. There were, for a few minutes there were some rumors online about, the breakup, the nature of the breakup of our relationship. But just so everybody's clear, John and I are still close friends. John, give me the number one reason that a Georgia fan listening to this now, we're on the cusp of June. We're in the dog days, people trying to get themselves excited about the Braves. That's how desperate we are for sports. Give a Georgia fan the number one reason why they should be excited about this 2025 version of the Georgia Bulldogs.
Well, I'm going to start with something very simple, but it is an incredible reason to be excited.
Okay.
And it is the number 32. Daniel, do you know what the number 32 represents?
Tell us.
That is the number of games that Georgia has won inside Sanford Stadium in a row. 32. It has been damn near 6 years since Georgia lost a college football game inside Sanford Stadium. And you know what also happens in this season, Daniel? Georgia gets the meat of their schedule, the
Big
toughest
boys.
teams on the schedule coming to Athens. You get Alabama in Athens for the first time under Kirby Smart. You get Texas in Athens. You get Ole Miss, who I'm not sure Ole Miss is going to be as good.
We'll see.
I don't know they were that good last year, let's just be honest. But you get Ole Miss in Athens. You get the games that kind of would give you on paper the heartburn of this season. And because the SEC decided last year that they were going to send Georgia to Alabama, to Texas, to Ole Miss, the hardest schedule in Georgia history, as far as I'm concerned. Now you get to flip it, and you also get to flip it in a way where, Kirby Smart, people can say a lot of things about what happened in 2024. But one thing that has not happened, and someone is going to have to prove to me that it can be done, is for a ranked team to come into Sanford Stadium and beat Kirby Smart, because it just has not happened in
Not
8
since
years. And not
2016,
since
John.
2016.
Not since Georgia had a bad team in his very first season. Not since
Yes.
Isaiah McKenzie was running up and down the field.
Exactly.
John.
That is the last time a ranked team won a game in Sanford Stadium. And the only other game that Georgia has lost inside Sanford Stadium was when Jake Fromm was throwing 2 interceptions and Rodrigo Blankenship was missing a field goal. Things that just did not happen even with that team, right? And so everything went wrong in that one day in 2019. So for me, it starts there. The excitement starts with the schedule because Georgia gets these teams at home. And if you love college football, and if you're a Georgia fan especially, you should be thrilled for the atmosphere, for the media coverage, for everything that's going to happen in Athens, Georgia this fall when those teams come to Athens for the first time. That's the number one thing I'm excited about for this team. Doesn't even touch the players or anything that has to go right. Getting those teams to come to Athens, I think is something to be excited about in May for sure.
Yeah, we'll get to all that, players and stuff in the roster in the next couple segments. But you're absolutely right. And Georgia, John, you know this as well as anybody, gets dumped on as being an average home field environment all the time. It's a talking point in the national media. When they hand you your national media credentials, they hand you a card, and on that card it says Jake Fromm was in the Little League World Series, and Georgia has an average home field advantage in the SEC, that it's just not of an environment like Jordan-Hare Stadium. It's not an environment like Bryant-Denny. It's not an environment like Death Valley. It's just a ho-hum, middle of the pack, casual fan environment. You're going to see some games because now that the long dark night of Gary Danielson and CBS has ended, John, you're going to see these Kirk Herbstreit game day night games for the biggest games of the weekend. And Georgia's going to end up with some of those at home at night, and you're going to get some of those atmospheres. And, I'll say this, those teams better pray it's not raining, because if that home field environment plus the rain, and you'll never beat Georgia. You won't
come close.
No.
You won't come close. And Dano, you make a great point, right? I mean, Georgia, Sanford Stadium does get, knocked a bit about its environment, but Georgia is, last I checked, I'll have to rerun these numbers again. Last I checked, Georgia was close, may have been dead last in night games inside Sanford Stadium in the last 6 years. I mean, this is a stadium where, when you play these games, I mean, I remember 2021, Georgia had a top 10 at the time, believe it or not, a top 10 matchup with Arkansas.
I was there.
I was there. College game day was there. The whole situation. It was a noon kickoff.
Nooner. We beat them 500-0. It was 30-0 in the first quarter.
Exactly. And in that game, Arkansas first drive had 2 false starts in a row to start the game, and that's at noon. So yes, please give me these games at night inside Sanford Stadium. That is something that Georgia fans will absolutely be excited about, and I think something that college football, I think Georgia has a real opportunity to showcase the atmosphere, because you've seen it. You saw it 2022 versus Tennessee. I mentioned the noon game at Arkansas, but you really, you saw it last year versus Tennessee, I'd say too, at night, but you haven't seen it, consistently, where you come in and it is a top 5, top 10 matchup where it's at night game and everything, all eyes are on Athens. And I think you're going to see that a couple times at least this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right, we're going to get to 2 more things that John is excited about. First, he's going to rerun his numbers, and we'll be right back right after these. But first, want to let you know about Monarch Money. You ever look in your checking account and wonder, where did all of your money go? That never happens to the Smith brothers, but it does happen to the rest of us. Between eating out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building your wealth. When I started using Monarch Money, I've said this before, you realize how much you are spending in all those little hidden charges, all those little hidden expenditures between food delivery and eating out and grocery delivery and all of that. Now I budget smarter and I save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year at Monarch Money. All right, John. Reason number one, the schedule, this home slate. If you're a season ticket holder, if you're planning on being in Athens this year, it's going to be a heck of a time. There's going to be great atmospheres. Georgia's going to be featured as if Kirby Smart needs help featuring the program. You know, like this is the biggest national recruiting powerhouse that college football has ever seen in terms of coast to coast recruiting. But that's only going to get more and more dominant as Kirby gets featured in these primetime games, as we've said with Kirk Herbstreit and Fowler and company. What's the second reason, as we transition and begin looking more at this team, John, what is the second reason that you think a Georgia fan should be excited about the 2025 season?
Well, you got to be excited with the skill players, particularly skill players that have transferred into Georgia. Daniel, I'm telling you right now, I don't know how Gunnar Stockton is going to perform for the Georgia Bulldogs, but he will have weapons. Okay, this is a
maybe
team.
Save that first thing for the what Georgia fans should be nervous about episode.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about.
Okay.
I am yes. When I say skill position, I am not talking about the quarterback position. But this team, I think, is going to be one of the more athletic skill position groups, both at wide receiver especially, but at running back and tight end that Georgia has had. And I mean that sincerely. And I'm talking about, you had a team with Ladd McConkey on it, Brock Bowers on it. You had George Pickens. You had some really good teams. But collectively, Daniel, this team, I'm telling y'all, I know Georgia fans have seen it, especially, Locked On Bulldogs listeners are tuned in as anybody can possibly be. But go turn on the tape of Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch.
Go ahead.
And especially Noah Thomas. I think people are sleeping on Noah Thomas. This is a guy that is 6'6", and he runs in many ways. I don't think he's not as fast as Ladd McConkey, but his route running and what he can do on the field is up there with some of the more athletic wide receivers that Georgia has had. He's big, he's long, he can get vertical. This is a guy that I think is going to be a problem. And if you remember last year, Georgia had a big wide receiver, wasn't as athletic as Noah Thomas, but ended up getting suspended. But I think that length is going to be very important and a key to this offense. And Georgia has it in a guy like Noah Thomas. Zachariah Branch, I think Zachariah Branch, Georgia's going to have to figure out and have the ability to get creative with Zachariah Branch. He's definitely not a big physical guy, but he can make people miss. He can line up in a lot of places on the offensive side of the ball. And those are just two guys from the transfer portal. When you start going down this list, you're talking about guys that we haven't seen, like Sakobe White, I think is going to be very good for Georgia. You've got Dylan Bell, that I think this is a money year for Dylan Bell. You've got even some of the guys as you go further down, some of these younger guys, right? Like CJ Wiley that's coming in here. You've got Talon Taylor that's coming in here. I mean, you've got a skill position group at wide receiver that I think as deep as Georgia's had. It's going to be a lot of guys that hopefully, they can learn the offense and we can get them in positions to make plays. That I think, Nate Frazier, I think is going to be one of the better running backs in the country. He's a guy who you don't see him on these like top 10 running backs in the country. And I think that is a consequence of what Georgia's run game did last year. But I think Nate Frazier, again, guy who can catch the ball, guy who can run with it. And then you look at the tight end. I think Oscar Delp, this is a kid who is ready for a money year. He's a guy who has all the tools, who has all the capabilities to be definitely not a Brock Bowers, but to be an elite tight end in the country. And we didn't see it last year. And you see, him paired with Lawson Lucky and Jaden Reddle in that tight end group. And I think the skill positions on the offensive side of the ball are going to be as good as Georgia has had in any of the national championship years. It's just going to be, can they put it together from an experience standpoint? But Georgia fans should be really excited about the athleticism and the crew that's going to be on the field at wide receiver and running back and tight end.
And Georgia fans, you've been clamoring for it, right?
Yeah.
You've been clamoring for this. This is what you've wanted all along. This was the thing that Georgia fans have wanted. And to your point, John, this is the year that they got it. You referenced Colby Young, who was very effective when he was in the lineup for Georgia. Noah Thomas comes in. Well, guess what? Colby Young's also back. So now you have multiple weapons who can accomplish that same purpose. We mentioned it. Clint and I have mentioned it before, but Georgia's been in a little bit of a recruiting rankings are not everything, John. You know that as well as anybody. Locked On Bulldogs listeners know that. Like everybody knows that. If recruiting analysts were that good at their job, they would be employed by Kirby Smart or other SEC coaches to evaluate talent. I'm just telling you what it is.
Or NFL teams. I mean, they would not be writing recruiting articles.
I promise you they would make more money as an analyst for Kirby than they would working for 24/7. So recruiting rankings don't mean everything. But Georgia's been in a little bit of a drought recruiting running backs. Nate Frazier's the highest recruited running back that Georgia's gotten since Zamir White. In 5 years.
Yep.
When was the last time, John, that Georgia had two former high school 5-star recruit wide receivers on the same roster? Zachariah Branch and Talon Taylor, you mentioned, both 5-star recruits coming out of high school, now playing together on the same roster. I literally cannot ever remember a time in my life that Georgia has had that. And so, again, Georgia fans, you've been clamoring for this. You've got it. Mike Bobo took a lot of heat last year because he told Carson Beck apparently to throw it to the other team, and Carson Beck did that. And so shame on Mike Bobo. But we will see if it all comes together. We will see how Georgia's able to utilize that talent. We'll see about the quarterback position, as John referenced, but there is so much talent on the field at any given time for Georgia that, I couldn't agree more, John. I think Georgia fans have got as much reason to be excited as they ever have been.
Yeah, and what I like about it, touching on the quarterback position, because I will say, we'll talk about that in the what are you nervous about at some point. But with this amount of skill players, you have so many options that Georgia did not have last year for a quarterback like Gunnar Stockton, right? Like you have a ton of scheme and things that you can do if things aren't going right. Georgia got so much heat last year for throwing all those screens. Well, if you're throwing those screens to somebody like Zachariah Branch, it might be different. Or if you're throwing those screens to, if you have a Lawson Lucky out wide, Oscar Delp inside, and Noah Thomas on the other side, I mean, you're just significantly bigger than those corners covering across every position. I mean, you can create mismatches, I think, with this group that you could not create last year in the same way. And I think that's really important for Georgia fans to know and get excited about. And now it just comes down to, can players make plays, and can Mike Bobo, actually like execute with this personnel? But if Georgia's offense sputters this year, it will not be because of lack of talent. And I do say, and I will say, last year, I do feel like there was some sputtering because of lack of talent in some positions. And there's just, I don't see those gaps this year.
Yeah. And it's going to sound like you're dumping on a kid when that's in no way my intention, because I think he's not only a good player, but, a good dog, a good Georgia Bulldog too. But I think Dylan Bell is a perfect case study. You go from last year, Dylan Bell is like at times not the best weapon, the only weapon available for Georgia. Like,
correct.
The weapon on the playing field.
Yes.
And now Dylan Bell is a receiver that is mentioned among the many elite weapons that Georgia has. I'm not saying that he's like the fifth best receiver on this team or whatever. Like, I'm not going to put him in that pecking order. I think time will tell, and we'll see how that plays out. But I think what you'll see this year is that Dylan Bell went from being the number one featured guy with Arian Smith, a wide receiver that we all know the struggles that he had while he was at Georgia catching the football. Dylan Bell goes from being the featured receiver to now being one of many, and probably not even the best of the many wide receiver options that Georgia has.
And Dylan Bell, we saw it last year. We've seen it before. Dylan Bell, he worked significantly better in an offense when there are other mismatches on the field. When you can line him up at running back, for example, or you can run, some jet sweeps with him, or the defense is a little bit off balance. When he's one of the featured guys, he is the type of guy that I'll say this. I mean, it's kind of like Deebo Samuel was at South Carolina, where Deebo was an incredibly good player, but when he lined up, when there was equal talent on the other side of the ball, he was an easy guy to cover if he was your featured, when he was the featured guy at South Carolina.
Yeah.
I think Dylan Bell is kind of fits in that mold. He can do a lot of stuff, but you gotta have people on the field that the other team fears besides Dylan Bell and Arian Smith, for example, because I think there were times last year where teams were just able to just, we saw at Ole Miss where if you're pushing, if you're getting a push on the defensive line and those are your guys that you're depending on the outside, it's just over. But with the talent Georgia has coming in now, I think, even if you get in a situation where, if the offensive line is getting beat in some situations, you're going to have some guys that can make plays. They're just bigger, they're faster, they're more athletic than Georgia had last year, and I'm excited about it.
John's got one more reason that you should be excited, which we will get to right after these. All right, John. So we talked about the schedule. We talked about the home slate. We got Alabama. We got Texas. Coming to Athens this year, Texas is trying to beat Georgia in a meaningful sporting event for the first time in the school's history, which would be amazing for them. Alabama trying to prove that they still belong after, in the college football playoff conversation, trying to get back to the college football playoff for the first time in 2 years. We talked about the roster. We talked about the skill talent on the offensive side of the ball. What other reason do you have for Georgia fans here in late May, early June, as we move through the summer? What's going to keep us holding on until August, John, until late August when fall camp starts and we get closer to that first game?
Daniel, we have actual real life competition at almost every position on the defense side of the football, especially at linebacker and at DB. And I can't remember a season coming in where it's like, wait, you got young guys that are pushing these like Butkus semifinalists for snaps at linebacker. You got young guys that are pushing, a 3-year starter at a boundary corner for a spot. My God, when I look at this defense and I look at, names like, obviously you start with the starters, you start with CJ Allen, you start with Raylan Wilson, you start with these guys. But then when I look at names like Chris Cole and I look at names like Ellis Robinson and I look at, you just go deep on this defensive side of the ball. And Daniel, it's been a minute since I've been excited. I've been excited about Georgia defense every year since Kirby's been here.
Yeah.
But every year you kind of feel like it's like, okay, this guy has established at this position. Like, this is the established guy. This year, I feel like there are established guys, but there's also guys that are pushing those established guys, which to me is what you should want every year. And I haven't felt that in a little while where I'm like, oh man, there are guys on the team that are coming into year 2 or even, true freshmen that are coming in that you're like, oh, these guys are going to push these starters for a spot. And I am so excited about that. I think it goes to what Kirby Smart has said in some of the spring press conferences where he said, I want to see guys who want to be great. I want to see guys who love the game. And I think what he's saying with that is you got a lot of young guys that are so talented. They're pushing these other guys. How hungry are they going to be to push some of these other guys for some of these positions? So for me, I'm so excited. I'm excited about Chris Cole. I'm excited about Justin Williams. I'm excited about Ellis Robinson. I'm excited about, guys like DeMello Jones. You just talk about some of these guys that are in that second level of this depth chart. And you got some dudes there that are going to push a lot of these starters. And also we know what that means when you look back at 2021. It's like Channing Tindall was a really, really good linebacker.
There we go.
And that dude, like he was on the field in key moments. And that's what you're going to have this year with guys, I think, like Chris Cole, for example, where it's like, hey, you look across that field and you see Chris Cole and CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson and, all on the field at the same time. Man, I couldn't be more excited to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, you referenced it, and I was going to go right to that 2021 defense where you got 3 linebackers that are all, really first-round talents. We know that Nakobe Dean didn't go in the first round, which is insane.
Kendrick, he's been a 2-year starter for the Eagles now on Super Bowl teams.
Well, the Eagles aren't any good, John, so that's not relevant. You had 3 guys playing 2 positions, and they're just rotating through there. Everybody's fresh. Everybody's ready when they come in, and these are elite level linebackers. I cannot remember a time when there were 4 inside linebackers that I was more excited about. I mentioned those 3, and there have been 3 before.
Yeah.
But this year, it really feels like 4. And because Justin Williams and Chris Cole, I don't care who you are or how good you were last year and the year before, as CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson have been for Georgia. They've been absolutely phenomenal. Very talented players in their own right. There's 0 chance that those 2 guys are kept off the field this year. 0. It's impossible. They're too good. You went to a lot of Georgia games last year. You saw them on special teams. They played punt cover. They played kick cover. And you saw Chris Cole get in playing nickel last year. This guy is a freak. They're long. They're athletic. I think Justin Williams might be the best pass rusher on the team. They're too talented. These might be 2 of the most talented players on Georgia's football roster, and neither of them are starters. John, to your point.
Yeah. And you know what you can do? Well, you know what you can do. So this is not directly correlated to the linebacker position, but the correlation works. Daniel, do you remember in 2021 when Georgia went to Tennessee and Tennessee comes down the field, and has a drive and scores? I think they scored in their first 2 drives. Yeah. Kirby Smart.
That first quarter was brutal.
Yeah, Tennessee's just marching down the field.
They printed a book about it, as I recall.
Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp, and along with Dan Lanning at the time and guys, made the decision to take Latavius Brenny out of the game, rotate Chris Smith back, bring in a couple of guys, William Poole and a couple of guys off the bench, and basically change the dynamic. And they shut it down. Tennessee did nothing after that. Literally just shut the whole thing down. They didn't score another touchdown until later in the game. And that's what you can do when you have this kind of talent in a room. If you have a situation where, like the 2023 SEC Championship game, where you have these 2 young linebackers that are hitting the wrong gap and, Jalen Miller is running down the field, you have guys on the team now at that linebacker position where if that's happening, if they find a mismatch, what do you do? Find a mismatch on CJ Allen, that's fine. We'll just bring in Chris Cole or Justin Williams. Not be Raylan Wilson didn't be able to get a pass rush, that's fine. We'll just bring in one of these other guys. I think that's what you get when you have this depth, and that's why it's so exciting for Georgia fans.
Yeah, and we Clint and I did an episode where we talked about got a starter who's most likely to get pushed and lose his job, and by no means knocking any player on the team, but it's hard to choose just one defensive player who's most likely to get pushed and lose his job because, as you mentioned, Ellis Robinson is coming for somebody's job. He's coming for Daniel Harris or somebody's job. Somebody's going to lose their job. Justin Williams is taking somebody's job, and it doesn't mean that you're bad or that you're not going to be an NFL football player. Because both CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson, you and I both know, are going to be NFL football players. But there's guys, and then there's guys, I feel that way on the defensive line. I'm all in, John, on this is the Jordan Hall year. I'm all in on Jordan Hall this year. Yeah. And then you got Elijah Griffin standing right next to him as a true freshman. These are two guys that were both rated as the #1 player by certain recruiting services in the whole country.
Yeah.
And they both play the same position, and they're both ready to come in and make an impact on Georgia's team this year. Like, I get that, there were guys last year that impacted our team. The South Carolina transfer, whose name Xavier
McLeod. Yep.
Yeah. No knock against Xavier McLeod. I love that he's on this team. I love that he's going to contribute. That's all great. But there's guys coming for his job because I think there's guys that are just too talented and they're just going to find their way onto the field. You could go every position on the defense, John.
Yeah, Joseph JJA. We haven't even talked about him. That's a guy. Again, he's got a lot to figure out. But that's a guy that was a top 5 defensive lineman in the entire country. That's now sitting behind Gabe Harris, who was another one. Like, you just start naming these names. Like, Kristen Miller was another one. I mean, shoot, Justin Green wasn't that highly rated, but Justin Green has a huge ceiling. And so. But to your point, though, when you mentioned it, I think when you look at that second level of the depth chart, there are guys that we will see and hear playing on Sundays. Guys like Justin Williams, Chris Cole, Ellis Robinson, Quintavious Johnson is another. I mean, these are guys that are certified dudes that are going to play at the next level, that have experienced players in front of them on, by the way, pretty damn good defense for all intents and purposes over the last couple of years, right? And so that's what I haven't been this excited. You summed it up best. I haven't been this excited about some of these position groups, the depth at them coming in. And Kirby said it last year. Kirby said in August, and nobody believed him. He said, we have the least amount of depth of guys who can play winning football that we've had since I was at Georgia. He said that last summer, and I think everybody was like, oh, it's just Kirby, whatever. Sure. And it turned out to be true. And what did he do? He's turned around, and it's like, you look at these guys, and you're like, okay, well, these 3 guys now have another year in the system, so they're probably ready, especially in the Scott Sinclair School of Strength down there in Athens. And then you start, looking at some of the transfers coming in. The guy from Army as another one. It's like, dude, like, you're just filling gaps and stacking players on that side of football. And so, haven't been this excited about a defense in a couple of years. Yeah, absolutely. If you want a fun activity before we let you go, just take a minute, pull up the roster, and project. I know we're talking about 2025, but just project Georgia's 2026 defense for a second. Like, if you want a fun activity, just to pass some time, because there's a lot of guys that we've just mentioned, including KJ Bolden, who we've not mentioned, who aren't even going to be draft eligible after this year. Like, aren't even going to be able to sniff the NFL draft like that. There's a 2026 defense coming for Georgia that is senseless. We haven't mentioned Zayden Walker. We haven't mentioned Isaiah Gibson. We haven't mentioned like there are names that literally haven't come out of our mouth, and we've gone 3 deep in the depth chart. I feel like, and these guys still haven't come. All right, he is John. Go check him out at Dog Dispatch. Follow him at John Tweet Sports. You're already doing that. We'll be here all week, or I will be, or somebody will be. I don't know. I've thought to find Clint. I'll get John. I'll just rope John in again. Whatever. I'll put a Clint wig on him, and we'll be back later this week with more Georgia content, and we will see you guys then.